Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jeanne, and I'm a Business Development Director at Impero. And with me today, I have Alexander, Head of Group Financial Controlling and Internal Controls at TORM. We're very excited to have you here with us today, and we've got a very exciting chat lined up for you. But before we get started, there's a few, housekeeping matters. So you had the opportunity to send questions in advance of this webinar. For those of you who did that, I have them with me already. For those of you who have questions as and when we go along, please feel free to just pop them in the chat, and we will basically have them ready for the end of the webinar, where we'll answer as many of them as possible. You will get this recording sent afterwards when we're done. So if you have to run off to a meeting, or if you want to listen to Alexander once again, or if you want to share this with one of your colleagues, you can certainly do so. I guess it's fair to say that we're basically ready now to talk about SOX. So essentially, just sit back and relax for the next 45 minutes, and Alexander here will basically take you through the journey of TORM and their compliance work, specifically around SOX. I will start out with essentially just giving you an introduction to Impero and who Impero is as a platform, because I know that a lot of you who are here today actually may not know Impero and what we're able to help you with. And then Alexander will take over and talk about the SOX compliance journey. So Alexander, maybe you can start by introducing yourself and let people know who you are, how long you've been working at TORM, and why you even got into the SOX space.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. First of all, my name is Alexander Schleiter. I'm head of Group Financial Controlling and Internal Controls at TORM. I joined 5 years ago in 2017, where some friendly people here at TORM called and said, we are on this journey. Do you want to be part of creating a SOX compliant control framework? And I think that's an opportunity that doesn't come very often, at least not in Denmark. So there was not a lot of thinking. I have been working as a consultant with controls before, prior to that in audit. And so I think I didn't think a long time about that. And then I joined in the end of 2017. First in the dedicated internal controls department, where I later, 2.5 years ago, got the chance to be the head of internal controls. And then we had some organizational changes here in the spring, and I also took over financial controlling. So I'm now in charge of everything related to our financial reporting, the back half of our annual report and quarterly reports, 20F, etc., and then the whole SOX compliance framework.
Brilliant, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here today. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act was introduced 20 years ago, and what that essentially meant that companies listed on the US stock exchange now have to basically have a control framework in place that is, SOX compliant. That has caused a lot of headache, a lot of extra burden for a lot of companies. So regardless if you are working with specifically SOX compliance today, or even just financial compliance or tax compliance, what you may often find is that you're really struggling with actually having time to do all of these compliance tasks. So what companies and what some of you may not realize is that there's a more simple and there's a more easy way to do it. There really is a way for you to save time, to save the stress, and maybe even to save some money. And that's what Impero is all about. So Impero as a platform is essentially a way to simplify and digitize your compliance workflow. It consists of, 3 main modules, which will basically help you. It's a helping hand on a day-to-day to make sure that you're doing what you should be doing, and you can easily monitor and follow up. So these 3 main modules is, first of all, the risk management module. the control management module, and the reporting module. The risk management module basically allows you to identify and describe and evaluate your risks. So from a SOX perspective, whether you want to talk about risks at an enterprise level or risks at a process level, you have the ability to create these risk directories within Impero. So it's a simple way of you essentially, first of all, building up your hierarchy. So whether you want to evaluate your risks at, say, a financial statement line item level or at a business process level, significant business process level, you can certainly build that. And once you've built your hierarchy, it's then for you to go in and identify and describe your risks. Using Impero's, say, flexible risk cards, you really have the ability to add all of the different risk attributes and risk dimensions that you would like so that it matches your risk framework. Once you've described your risks, as the methodology goes, the ones that knows the business the best should also be the ones evaluating the risk, assessing these risks. So you now have the ability to push them out to each of your entities, each of your risk owners, if you like, for them to perform the actual risk assessment. Easily done with an impact and likelihood scale that again can be matched to match your risk framework. It also gives the risk owners, the assessors, the opportunity to add these risks to mitigating actions. All of that consolidates up to a neat and nice risk map, an easy overview for you to understand what is your risk exposure at an inherent and at a residual level. You even have the risk history so that when the auditors come and visit you, say throughout the year, you can go back in time and say, this was my risk exposure then, and this is my risk exposure now. The control management module is a way for you to essentially easily design your internal controls. It's a way for you to automate all of your manual tasks and processes and your controls by simply setting up these control activities, control instructions, if you like. So for those of you who works with SOX today, for those of you who works with controls in general, what you may often find is that when you work your way around in the, say, finance organization, people have quite a good understanding of, say, risks and controls. But as soon as you move outside of the finance organization, people may not have the same appreciation. And this is where you can essentially, per control, build an instruction as simple or as, say, detailed and as advanced as you would like to make sure that people are actually know exactly what they need to do in order to perform this control effectively. So once you've designed your control activity, you now have the ability to assign clear accountability. So who is doing what, who is performing, who is reviewing, who is potentially the second reviewer, and when is this to be done. All of that basically kicks off an automated workflow so that there's no doubt as to who should be doing what and when. What a lot of our customers are saying is that some of the nicest features around Impero is that the control performers, the control reviewers, who actually constitutes 93% of our overall user base, they may not even realize they're using Impero. Because without the need for login credentials, they simply receive a note in the inbox with a link. They click on the link, takes them to the control instructions, they fill it out, and they upload the documentation, submits the controls, and that's it. Close the window, go back to your day-to-day work. So it really is an integrated process in your day-to-day work. Now we understand our risks. Now we have designed these controls. A very important part of SOX and controls in general is, of course, that these have actually been embedded, that these are live, that they are actually being performed within the organization. And that's what we have our reporting module to do. So essentially, it's an easy way for you to monitor and follow up, making sure that your colleagues are actually doing what they are meant to be doing. So we can build these very, say, tailor-made, customized reports that we can send out automatically to the inboxes of different layers of the organization, so to the team leads, to mid-management, to upper management, even use this for audit committee reports, for them to understand what is the status when it comes to the controls. All of this basically allows you a one-stop shop where you have an overview a centralized overview where you can see what is the status. You have all of the documentation secured in one platform. You've got a clear audit trail, you've got your change logs. So now all you have to do is really a matter of giving your auditors, whether that's being internal audit or external audit, access to the platform for them to go in and basically dig through the documentation they need in order to get comfortable with your control environment. So that's Impero for those of you who are not familiar with the platform. And this is really just to basically set the frame for you to understand the conversation that Alexander and are now going to have for the next half an hour. So Alexander, that was my way of explaining Impero and what it is as a platform. If you were to describe it to someone that's unfamiliar with the platform, how would you describe Impero?
Yeah, a good question. I think the first that pops into mind is probably the simplicity. It's very easy to use. It's very easy to set up. So we don't need an IT department. We don't need application managers to assist us in defining new control programs, setting up risk changes, access right granting, and so on. Of course, we can decide to do so if we want, but everything can be handled, by a very small team. I think so. So a very simple tool, and then it works, I think, and that's something that is very important to us. I think it's high up on the requirements list that it has to work. We are performing a lot of controls in TORM, so the system cannot be down. And it is very rare that it's down, and usually then it's communicated in advance. So I think that's probably the words I would use to describe. Yeah. So
really, just to boil it down in a few simple words, it just works. That's how you would want to describe Impero.
yeah, that's very simple way of putting it, but in essence, yes.
All right.
That's it. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So I think what would be helpful for the participants today is if you could basically just introduce them to TORM, so we have an understanding of, say, the size and the complexity, and even just your business model, so that people understand the struggles that you're facing. Yeah,
definitely, I can do that. So TORM, we are a pure product tanker company. So we ship our product tank fuels around the world. It could be it is refined oil products in essence, but it could also be vegetable oil and so on. But that is what we do. We have approximately 80 vessels, most of them owned, but around 80 vessels that we operate all over the world. I don't think there's any ocean in the world where we don't have a TORM vessel present at the moment. Very old business. I think 1889, so it's an old, very, I wouldn't call it famous Danish company, but at least an old company I think many have heard of before. A very proud company, proud history. Revenue-wise, you can see it on the screen, approximately $500 million we had for the first half of the year in US dollars, and almost $2.5 billion on the balance sheet. So you can see a kind of a heavy asset based company, and that is due to the vessels primarily. And then another good way to describe TORM is also maybe to say we are kind of a small company, but in a big setup. Now I'm jumping to the listing. So we are actually a UK parent company that is listed both in Denmark on NASDAQ in Copenhagen and in New York. So we have a dual listing with a parent company that is no longer in the EU after Brexit, and that also, of course, increases the compliance complexity. Yeah. But that is also why I think it's funny and exciting to be in TORM. There's a lot of challenges, new requirements all the time. I think we can talk later about that. Also, requires a need for a system that can sort of assist us in this. But yeah, 350 land-based employees, so kind of a small organization on the land in 6 different locations. Most of our colleagues are on the sea. They are on the 80 vessels that we sail around the world.
And when did you first, so you're listed in the US. When did you get listed and when did you have to be, say, SOX compliant by?
Yeah. So first we were listed in Copenhagen. I don't know exactly when we were listed, but several years ago. And then we were also listed in the US in the beginning of the new millennium. And unfortunately, times were not great for TORM after 2010-ish. So we had to go through financial restructuring. And at the same time, we were delisted from the US. We kept our listing in Copenhagen, but we were delisted from the US and didn't get listed again before 2017. So in the period after the reconstruction, we were bought by banks took over, and then a private equity firm came in and took over the majority. And those were sort of the reasoning behind also getting back. It was a US private equity firm that took the majority shareholding in us. So we were listed again in the US due to anticipation of market interest, investor interest in the US market. But that is the private equity firm model. I'm not into their reasoning behind it, but that's at least what I assume.
So relisting in 2017. So I know that this was before your time in TORM, but do you know how things were done, how they were handling the compliance processes prior to you basically joining TORM?
Yeah, so I've only seen minor parts of it, but at least what I have been informed about is that it was partly based on SharePoint, partly based on other folder structures on shared drives. So I would say a little bit unstructured, probably is a good word to put it. And it was not really centralized. So you could say it was still managed at the headquarters in Denmark, but there was not really this overview where you easily could see what is the status of controls. Are they being performed? Do we have any errors identified as part of the review? So it sort of lacked the, can we call it, it basically just lacked data about the execution of the control. And there was not really a good workflow system in place.
All right. So if not to put the words in your mouth, but basically quite inefficient, quite difficult to work with compliance, quite cumbersome. Yeah,
I think so. And that is something, I guess they built it up after SOX was introduced in 2002. I mean, companies were still sort of, juggling, how much and how to put in efforts. And I think that was what TORM chose to do. And probably it worked at the time. I don't know exactly how other GRC tools like Impero were at the time, but at least it worked for them. At least they could keep up their SOX compliance, but probably, as you mentioned, probably very inefficient. But again, I was not hired.
But I think it's also fair to say that actually there's this ever-changing and increased focus and scrutiny from the SEC. So what may have worked well then, most definitely is not good enough today because we are in this ever-changing market. So I guess that's really what sparked your, need for having a system in place, actually getting some more, standardization and structure around it.
Definitely. I mean, even though the SOX standard as such has not changed, requirements are still changing. And you say, why is this? But that is the focus from the SEC, focus from the PCAOB, which is sort of reflected down to auditors and then put to the company like TORM. So we can see every year there are new requirements. And if we don't have the basis, which in our case is the system as a foundation, I think it would be very difficult to handle, or at least very resource demanding.
So now essentially you have Impero in place to help you on this, in this ever-changing market, so to say, and really help you with your SOX compliance. Could you tell us a bit about how are you using Impero for SOX?
Yes. I think we maybe should start by just quickly listing what is we can call it the governance model in TORM. Of course, management or the CEO, CFO, they are overall accountable for our SOX compliance. and the audit committee is overseeing that. Then responsibility is pushed down in the organization. So I'm acting as a second line of defense in the control design. But we have control owners, we have risk owners, we call it actually process owners, but essentially it's risk owners. We have system owners responsible for the different systems that we have in scope for SOX. It could be our accounting system, it could be the voyage sort of a handling system called the customer system, sales system, PO and so on. So all the systems we have in scope, we have owners for that, owners for all the risk, owners for all the controls. And so responsibility is sort of pushed down in the organization and spread out. So I don't think that could maybe be a few, but I don't think there's many people in TORM, and then at least I hope they are newly hired. I don't think there's many people in TORM on the land of the 350 people that has not heard about SOX compliance. I think it goes out everywhere, because there is a VP in most of the departments in TORM that are responsible for either a control or both a control and risks. So it is a joint effort, I think you can say. So that is sort of, just to set the scene of how we are using Impero. Of course, we have quarterly scopings to sort of, see, is there anything, do we have new processes coming in? If you have read our Q2 report, you can see we bought a new company, a smaller company. Of course, that also impacts our controls. So there might, as part of our quarterly scoping, there might be new significant processes in scope that has risks, that need controls, and that we can push out either to existing or to new owners, depending on how sort of, in this case, the acquisition and the processes that follow, how they are. So that is something we also do, and that is, of course, is in Impero, in a control, in some of our entity level controls. And to all the risk owners and control owners, they are also getting pushed out on a half-yearly basis in this case to re-evaluate their risks and their controls. Are they still, is the risk still present? Has it changed? The controls, can we still perform it in the same way? Have we changed the system? Is there something that has changed that impacts? So we're using Impero to facilitate that, is pushing out as a control through Impero.
So that's the high level, design of the framework, making sure that actually you have the right focus at all times. What if we drill down a bit further? What types of controls do you have in the system? And maybe you can put a number as to how many controls do you have in the system?
Yeah. So first of all, we started just by, I think, this getting Impero, getting SOX compliant is it's a marathon. I would say.
Yeah.
I know some just participated in a marathon, but it is a marathon. And so we started by doing just financial controls or financial reporting related controls. That was sort of the mandate that we got in my department. But that has sort of evolved, and I can say we have approximately 200 controls related to our financial reporting that covers all our 6 entities. Then, over time, people have sort of seen, okay, Impero, it works. And then we have, received requests to say, okay, we have these covenants towards our banks. Can we set up operational controls or compliance controls, maybe we can call it that, in Impero to facilitate, our processes. So at the moment we are, over 250 controls, primarily financial reporting related, but also compliance and operational controls and mandate controls. So the board of directors have also assigned mandates to different people in TORM, and we also have controls to follow up on those mandates, so we can report to the board in case of any, if we are not, in line with our mandates. So that is,
So really,
was that what you were looking for?
Yeah, exactly. For you, it's really a matter of actually creating a culture of compliance. It's not only a matter of your entity level controls and your process level controls and your IT controls to serve for the SOX compliance. It's also a matter of, well, actually, this is a good use case. You can use it for so many different things to basically support having good governance, having a sound business in place.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, having controls in general has just changed the mindset in TORM. Now I said that people are requesting new controls to sort of manage the workflow, the processes underneath, but I can also see it when people are talking about whether it's just a simple analysis that are for purely operational purposes. People think about completeness and accuracy of data used, because we, as part of our SOX controls here, we have specific sections in the control description that say you need to be able to document the completeness and accuracy of the data used if you pull it out of systems and so on. So I mean that the mindset also and the approach to analyzing data has changed. Yeah.
So you're essentially saying 250 controls, roughly 300 people. How much time does it actually take to maintain? How many administrators do you actually have in the system?
We are at the moment, we could use one more, but at the moment we are, let's say, 1.5 people maintaining the framework.
Yeah.
But again, it's back to how the governance model. I mean, the responsibility is pushed out. So if the small team where we have 1-2 dedicated people for this, if they were to manage everything themselves, no, they would be overwhelmed. But and that is not because of the system Impero, that's just because of SOX in general, but it is because it's pushed out through the organization.
So talking about this governance model, I think it's fair to say that a system can't solve everything. It's really a matter about, say, tone at the top as well.
Oh,
so yes. How have you set that up in TORM?
I think in the beginning when we started this journey, that was just prior to me getting on board, but it really started at the top. So it was a focus from the CEO, the CFO. I guess they also know the accountability that they have, the penalties that they can receive if not living up to the requirements. So they take it very seriously. So a very clear tone at the top. I remember we started with a video where our CEO sort of explained the importance of this, and we are on a journey here towards getting listed in the US and so on. So very high focus. We have, I also said previously, the audit committee oversees all of this. So on a quarterly basis, there's also reporting to the audit committee. Besides that, management, of course, it's really in the awareness of management. So I get questions a lot. It's also mentioned at every town hall meeting that we have, where we present, well, how did the Q quarter go, our quality results, so we just released the Q report and so on. SOX is also mentioned. So maybe it's not the highest agenda point. I think if I would put a point to that is maybe our safety culture. But I mean, it's still there. A little bit less than it was 5 years ago, but definitely there. And then besides that, I think in the beginning to sort of drive this change management and cultural change behavior, it was also part of our corporate KPIs.
So you had a specific Impero KPI.
Yeah, you could say it was SOX, but it was measured on data in Impero.
Yeah.
Yes, but it was a SOX KPI focused on both the timeliness and quality. Of course, with the focus on quality, but people need to do controls on time. We need to change the behavior. So that's why timeliness was also a part of this measuring. That have sort of, as we mature in TORM and get more familiarized with compliance or used to compliance, we are not, measuring on timeliness anymore. We are still reporting overdue controls on a daily basis to the management team. But there's a little bit less focus on timeliness now, because that is sort of, that foundation is already in place. The concrete has been poured in, it's hardened, it's pretty solid. So now it's more on the quality. Where we do internal testing and we have external testing, both from our internal audit, but also our external auditors. So, but it's still part of our KPIs, and managers in the different departments can also choose to, and some choose to, because again, the awareness and the importance, they choose to have KPIs for their teams related to SOX, related to Impero.
I like how you're basically, I'm not saying using Impero for, but it's basically a big part in basically creating and maintaining this culture of compliance, and then it just helps you keep taking you to the next level. So once you've got the timeliness in place, once that's embedded, once that's thinking is embedded within your organization, well, then you can now think about, say, the quality and the effectiveness of these controls. So really just keep improving and improving day by day. So that's really nice.
Yeah, definitely it is. But I think it will never sort of, even though no matter how mature we will be as an organization, I don't think that management will ever stop looking at it.
No.
Because it is just ever evolving requirements, and if we are not on our toes and ready for a sprint all the time, I mean, we will just get the deficiencies. And we don't have a zero error culture in TORM, but we don't want a material weakness. And I think also that's evident from market analysis. If you get a material weakness, it can actually lead to significant decrease in share price. And of course, I don't think any investor or owner, and for that matter, management, is interested in that. So it is high on the agenda always. I don't think it cannot get off the agenda, but it maybe can get a bit lower.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that compliance is here to stay. It's something you just have to do. It's basically part of having a business. We have already touched a bit upon it, but it would be great if you could basically talk a bit about what are some of the results that the use of Impero have brought you.
I think I mentioned it already, some of the results, right? The culture, the thinking, it's brought into operational processes. People think about, where's the data coming from? But if we, more tangible stuff, I would say you had it on a slide also, audit. So as part of the audit, I don't know what the other companies that you viewers are using, what they call it, the auditors, but CAS list, PVC list, the request list from auditors when they come for interim and year-end audit. That has been sort of, you cannot call it automated, but it's part of that. So they go in themselves in Impero and say, okay, 1481 bank reconciliations. It's, and then they do that link. So we are not providing material for them. Everything is in Impero.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely, a resource efficiency from the auditors, but especially for TORM.
Yeah.
I can also see when we have auditors in-house, which we have all the time. But if we talk about year-end audit, we don't work as long hours as I remember that people in companies did when I was an external auditor, because all the data is sort of already put in to Impero that the auditors can extract themselves, and it's been part of the month-end closing activities, quarterly closing activities, that everything is sort of in there already.
Yeah.
So I think it has sort of, you could say, the stress on the business has decreased when it comes to audit.
Yeah, yeah. And I think then again, one thing is the documentation. Another thing is basically you've got your audit trails, you've got your change logs, you've got everything you need in order to basically give the auditors the peace of mind that this control environment is actually functioning. So that's a lot of the feedback that we get from our customers. Actually, it's now a matter of taking out all of this redundant and say non-value added work. So the auditors simply get a view access. They can find what they should be looking at, and you can focus on the key aspects of your job.
But I think actually so it's good to save time, but I think the most important maybe, and I didn't mention that before, is just confidence in the numbers. So, and that is something that is important for me as responsible for the back half of our external reporting. I follow the controls. I can see they are being performed. It's possible. So we have made a setup in Impero where people report in unadjusted errors.
Yeah.
So and we have things called a task-based report in Impero that sort of picks up from all the controls that have been performed. So we can see that all X amount of controls this month has been performed, and we had 7 unadjusted errors on these different financial statement line items aggregating into whatever. So we sort of, that's a good, I get a good feeling, in my stomach about it.
Yeah.
And then, all the numbers are just getting checked on a monthly basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not waiting for quarter and the year end. Most is done on a monthly basis. We just give confidence in the number.
Yeah. Which is essentially what SOX is about, right? having
Yes.
being able to
Yes.
report accurately to the market. So
Yeah.
All right. So I know you've got a shared service center in is it India?
Yeah.
What's the story behind that? I know you're also using Impero for your shared service center.
Definitely, yeah. We use Impero everywhere, on all entities. but yeah, we have a shared service center in India that increased in size about a year ago, and we have sort of been in the transition phase now of moving even more controls to Impero.
Mm-hmm.
But since, as also mentioned up here, it's a very centralized setup. So it's easy for us to still keep track of what is going on in India.
Mm.
So we have very qualified people in India doing the controls, but still, we would like to have the feeling centrally in headquarters, and we still keep that with Impero. We can see the controls are being performed on time, and so on. What we did in the transition phase was in the beginning just to move the performance of the controls to India, and then keep the reviewers locally or in headquarters.
Yeah.
And then for the more lower risk controls, now we are starting to push out also the review to India, as we can see that quality is still being kept on high standards. Controls are being performed on time. So that's, I think, everybody was already on Impero because that's part of our sort of model that we have everybody land-based in TORM on the Impero platform. So it was quite easy to sort of do that transition.
Yeah. So it really is a matter of, say, this team collaboration across entities, as you're saying. Well, actually, you're covering 6 entities using Impero, and you can just sit here from Copenhagen in your office, and you can get this nice gut feel that actually you can sign off on the numbers and you can report to the market with a peace of mind.
Yeah.
So 250 controls, roughly 300 people as part of Impero. How long does it take to implement? I know this was before your time, but can you give any indication of how much work is there actually around Impero?
Yeah, I think it would be the best example would probably be to use when we had our new Navision, new accounting system in 2020. It impacted a lot of the processes. Approximately 4 processes was significantly changed, new risks, etc. And we did the work outside Impero. We did all the workshops to understand the new risks that are coming from the new system, or in this case, actually, we reduced a lot of risks. But anyway, redesign controls outside Impero. But putting that into Impero and validating and so on for these 4 processes, I would say a day maybe per process, containing 10 to 20 controls and the same amount of risks.
Yeah.
So I think, fairly simple. I mean, but we also already have, and that's something we designed way back, we already have sort of a design template that we use.
Yeah.
So whenever we have new controls, it's the same format that we use.
Yeah.
So the control description is built up in a certain way, the tags are in a certain way, the scheduling and the tasks and so on. So we just copy that.
Yeah.
And then it's pretty simple. Just when we have that also template in Word outside, just copy paste it out in. So a lot of the work, of course, is done during the workshops with the different business responsibles, but putting it into Impero is pretty fast.
Yeah, so actually it's a matter of getting the basics right. You need to have a skeleton in place. You need to think about end-to-end what do you want to achieve with this. And then of course you need to have your risks, you need to have your controls. But once that is ready, actually putting it into Impero takes a day.
It's really simple. And I think back to what I started in my in this conversation to say is that how I would describe Impero. We don't need IT to help us. If we need a new tag or a change to a tag or something, we can do it ourselves. So yeah.
To elaborate for those of you who are not that familiar with Impero, when Alexander mentions tags, it's really reporting dimensions within the platform. So any reporting needs you may have, you basically add a tag to your controls, and you can simply report on that going forward. So that's what's meant by that. I think before we jump to the Q&A, I simply have one last question for you. What's next on your Impero agenda?
I think so. You mentioned one of the things actually in the beginning where you talked about this risk assessment where we can push it out. So yes, we have used Impero for it, but it has kind of been a manual process outside Impero. So even though Impero was pushing us to sort of do it, we are still doing it outside Impero. I know that is now possible to do in Impero. So I think definitely that is something that is pretty high on our agenda. So we want to do the risk assessment within Impero. Could be nice if you also did it to the control designs, but maybe that's a to do for you to develop. But I mean, that is something that we would like to do. We will use the risk assessment more actively. And then integration to systems. So the reporting module that you showed in the beginning, I think it's good. But if we want to do just a simple example, if we want to do a pie chart, or if we want to do reporting in a slightly different way, then extracting data and have it in our BI system is something we are looking into. So we can do more, I would say a little bit more improved reporting, even though what we have in Impero is good. We want to do it even better.
Are there any other, say, compliance domains that you are thinking about bringing into Impero? Because I think that's what we see for a lot of our customers. As soon as they get to know the workings of Impero, and that's also back to your point around, well, actually, we're not only using it for financial reporting controls, we're now also using it for other areas. It's really a mind change, how you can use it to basically secure different parts of your, say, compliance processes.
I mean, we had ESG, so that is also ever evolving, I think, but very exciting topic actually. So, and that is also something that we, at least in TORM, have mostly anchored within the CFO area, and that also means it's part of our external reporting. So we need, again, we don't want to go to market with numbers that we're not confident in, and that's both financial related, but it's also non-financial related. And ESG comes in here. So we have actually already set up simple controls about ESG in Impero, but definitely something we want to do more. We don't use risk for ESG in Impero at the moment. Definitely that's something we want to do at some point in time. But again, it's small baby steps. We are not dragging a big ESG compliance hat down over our business. So we take small steps, but
and I think that's an important point really to end off with, to be quite frank with you. That is to say, you don't have to go with the full shebang from the beginning with Impero. You can really just focus on, say, select few processes at a time, or say with select few KPIs if we talk about ESG, and then you can basically just build and add on as and when you're mature. And I think that takes us actually straight into our questions, because one of the questions that we were having was essentially also around, let's say we had one talking about integrations. So there's a question, do you have integrations with Impero with other systems? You slightly mentioned it. Yes, we do have integrations currently. We can basically integrate to Power BI, but we can also ingest information from other source systems into Impero. There's another question here, which is it's being asked, to which extent are you training the staff who are performing the control? And that's a quite good question, in the sense that actually we aren't. We can if our customers would want us to, but it's simply so easy to use Impero that as an end user, as a control performer, you simply receive an email in your inbox and you have a link, and that takes you exactly to the say control instruction, control activity, if you like, where you just follow the questions being asked, upload your documentation, and then you're done. So the answer is, well, we can train people if they want us to, but actually there isn't really a need for it.
Is this a question maybe also to TORM? Maybe
it could be a question to TORM.
I mean, I fully agree to what you are saying, but if the question was to TORM, then I can maybe also answer that in that context. We train people all the time, so everybody who joins TORM that will be related or will be performing controls, they undergo training. So we have a training material that we update on a yearly basis, but that is something we use. They also get an introduction. Everybody in TORM actually who joins TORM has a 30-minute session with me where it just says, no, why controls, why SOX listed in the US and so on. And yeah, and then of course we train people in specific areas. I think a good example could maybe be last year we had a focus on review controls. So we had session with both performers, but primarily reviewers of what is the required level of documentation for their review. So we called in people in different workshops and just talked about that. And we have also been to India, of course, to train the people out there. And we are going again in actually a month time to India to again do a brush up.
Yeah. So from a technical perspective, I think it's fair to say not needed, but more to make sure that the quality and the understanding is there. That's most definitely needed. That's to say the change management process and all of that you would always need. I think we've got time for one last question, because there is a question specifically to Alexander as well. That was one of the ones that came in before. So the question is, Alexander, would you recommend Impero for organizations that are not subject to SOX, and then why or why not?
So I think the simple question answer to that is yes, definitely. I mean, the price of Impero I think is good. So and if the cost benefit simple analysis here, I think the cost is pretty low compared to how much more comfort at least the people in my position will be getting. Comfort in the numbers, and that is just key. And being able to go back in time, you have a secure location for the documentation and so on. So and you can also help the workflow of the month closing activities. It doesn't have to be just financial reporting, checking numbers, but it can also drive the process.
Yeah.
So definitely yes, I have a hard time imagining not having a system like Impero.
So really going back to some of the things I mentioned at the beginning, it really helps you save time and save the stress really, and also save some money. So
yeah, and again, also as I mentioned, the auditors, it's so nice just to say, yeah, you can find it in 14.8.1 or whatever control. I mean, it's so easy. That documentation that is put in there has already been reviewed. It just relieves the stress in the high peak seasons for us.
Yeah.
And for any other company, I would say. Yeah. But I think once you go into Impero, I think you should go all the way. It doesn't have to be SOX compliant, but either you do it or you do not do it. I think that's maybe something I would attach to that message.
Final point on the agenda today. I understand that this is your first year having an integrated audit, so I'll be following you closely on the sideline and see how your 20th turns out with your control environment. But hopefully Impero is able to support you on that journey. Thank you everyone for attending today. I hope you found it insightful and you can see the benefit of Impero. You're more than happy to scan the QR code on the screen and we can then keep the conversation going. You can get a detailed, tailor-made demo to understand how we can help you with your compliance journey. So thank you so much, Alexander, for joining me today. And thank you to all of the participants for listening in. You'll get the recording and you can listen to it once again, and please feel free to share it with your colleagues as well. So thank you so much for your time and have a great day.